This is Mrs. H Psychology. Specific exam question. This time it's going to be a short one, but it could apply to an essay question. It is for AQA Psychology, AQA specification, but it could be applied to the others as well. For AQA, approaches comes in paper 2, and here we're looking at the psychodynamic approach. Specifically, this little question, why a psychodynamic approach is seen as unscientific. So if I pull up the question for you to have a look at, it is actually from June 2011. It is, yes it is, an old Spec B question, Sci B4, but in fact this sort of question could crop up as well with your papers. So the question is this: explain why some psychologists regard Freud's investigations into the unconscious mind as unscientific. This is a 4-marker, have seen it for an essay question, but we will study more about the scientific processes in year 2, and you would be able to easily develop this further. Okay, but this is just an introduction. So, and just to show you how to approach this. So, what you first need to know are the basic input really of the scientific method. Scientific method involves key steps. Step 1 is having a common subject matter we call a paradigm. Step 2 is that would lead into a theory, a specific theory, which we would then test with operationalized hypotheses. Okay, and hypotheses, remember, are predictions about what you're expecting to find. We then test those using empirical methods, all right, open to public scrutiny. We'll have a look at a specific definition, and for example, one being the experiment, which gives us nice causal links, and then that feeds back into your theory and your hypothesis, and it's a circular process. Okay, so we're going to learn more about that. You'll see another video on scientific processes. That's just to get you into this sort of question. Okay, so the question is why Freud's work is not seen as scientific. In other words, why it's seen as unscientific. So in order to answer this, we need to tackle what we mean by these scientific processes, what we mean by science, basically, and then we just say why Freud's work does not meet those requirements. Okay, so let's have a quick look at some suggestions. These are just suggestions. You could do completely different ones. There was so much that you could say, but as an example, we would probably want to bullet 4 bullet points in your mind. Each bullet point really needs to have some nice terminology. Okay, so it can't be off the top of your head. We need to be showing that we've studied this subject and we can use the correct terminology. Really, really crucial to access those marks. So, for example, scientific processes involve having a theory from which one makes testable hypotheses. You can throw in operationalized hypotheses, which we then use empirical objective methods to test, for example, being controlled experiments, something like that, to find causal links. So plenty of information in that first bullet point. Then we're going to say, right, how far does Freud meet those requirements? Unfortunately, it focuses on the unconscious, and maybe you could go down this route. And obviously content in the unconscious is maintained there in order to protect the conscious mind. So if we wanted to test it, even if we could access it, we would need to bring that to the forefront. We would need to bring that to consciousness. So those memories, whatever, into conscious thought. And obviously they're in the unconscious to protect them, so that would cause them harm, and therefore from that point alone, ethics alone, it would be untestable. So you could comment on that. We could also say, I pause that a minute, another problem that makes it unscientific is his use of case studies as his main method of investigation. Now obviously case studies are a very subjective interpretation of data collected through interviewing his patients. So science expects really objective, verifiable information, and all that Freud is collecting here is very subjective information, which he then interprets from his personal point of view, and basically, applies them, or applies his concepts to those cases. Another point you could add, although you've probably got enough for 4 marks now, but if you wanted to, yet another problem is that Freud relied on retrospective information about childhood experiences. Right, and retrospective means looking back. So here's the individual They're looking back at something that happened a long time ago. And obviously, you know, with the best will in the world, these will be unreliable. They're also subjective view, so there's somebody's interpretation of what happened as opposed to objective reality. They can't be verified because you wouldn't be able to get somebody to necessarily verify what happened, and so on and so forth. So again, it goes back to the fact that they are going to be unreliable. They are extremely subjective, and they don't meet these requirements that we have here. Okay, with the scientific steps. Okay, we have a quick look at the mark scheme because this is a suggested question. So full marks for things like unconscious mind, information based on recollections, retrospective memory, distortions, methodological issues, in other words, issues with the methods used, his case studies, difficulties with control, right, a replication because case studies involve just small groups or one individual, you know, lack of objectivity, falsifiability, that we can't falsify, but again, all of this we're going to cover more in our scientific processes. So this is just a short introduction